Odyssey of the Mind Mental Health Awareness Festival. My name is Osahan Tango, and I'll be your host for tonight. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about the idea of the Odyssey of the Mind. I was in the Media for Social Change class last semester in the spring, and I made a film about mental health, and I realized that how hard it is to really talk about mental health amongst people our age, amongst people just in general. The stigma is so high. So I wanted to create a situation and an environment that we could talk about these and bring this up and really get to know each other and vibe out, really. So I hope today we can start dedicating more time and effort and thought to really manifesting a more conscious collective of thought about healing and hope.
My dad was the one who taught me how to walk. He taught me how to shave, and unfortunately for me, he taught me how to dress. He taught the same kind of things to my sister, Laura, when she was born, and then later to our little brother, Ben. You know, Dad's always been my hero. We root for the same teams. We laugh at the same dumb jokes. You know, we've always been able to talk about anything and everything. At least that's what I thought. When I came home from college, my dad told me that 2 years ago he tried to take his own life. Now, this changed everything I thought I knew about him. As part of Dad's recovery, he started volunteering for this nonprofit organization, and they go into schools to help bring mental health awareness, but also hopefully help prevent suicide.
You know, conversation is really powerful.
After receiving extensive training, he began working full-time. Every year they hold a walkathon to raise funds and awareness for suicide prevention in St. Louis, Missouri. But there were some recent events that got Dad thinking about expanding their program to outside of the city.
The community of St. Clair is in turmoil tonight after 3 students take their own lives.
Most recent suicide was last night at 8 p.m.
After a freshman, sophomore, and junior from St. Clair High School took their own lives, all of them in less than 2 months.
When Dad read about these small-town suicides, he looked up the statistics and saw how much higher they were in rural areas across the state. Often 3 to 5 times higher than in cities like St. Louis or Kansas City. That's what led to his idea to bring his message to these communities. I offered to ride along, but my dad thought it might have more of an impact if we brought his message across the state on foot.
Okay, let's sing Happy Birthday to Eric while Daddy gets to take this. Okay, ready?
And I guess that's why I decided it was time to get to know a man I'd known my whole life,
Make a wish, Eric, and
but was
blow 'em out.
beginning to understand for the very first time. What you looking at there, big guy?
I'm looking at the Katy Trail, which is the trail that we'll be following across Missouri. And all the markers represent towns that we'll be stopping in to speak. Obviously Columbia, Jeff City, and then pretty much just east all the way across to St. Louis.
And where is St. Clair?
It's right here.
So about 200 miles?
200 miles.
I got $500 that says your knees don't hold up.
I got $500 that says you'll be done in a week.
I don't really know where I fit in this walk. I talked to my mom before all of this started, and she said, you have one job. You gotta make sure Dad finishes. It sounds easier than it might actually be, because he's old, and Dad and I both have actually had quite a bit of trouble finishing things throughout our life. So, we'll see.
We're super thrilled to have you here. Mr. Norwine, I am so excited that you chose us to kick off your walk from Kansas City to St. Louis, talking about the effects of mental health and what it does to our nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, can we say bye to Mark? He's got to get walking.
Are we walking? Are we walking? Let's go. I'm not running. I'm walking. I'm walking. Trying to prevent suicide by talking about mental health and bullying and hot topics
bullying
for
prevention.
bullying.
Oh, bullying. Okay. I thought you said bowling. I'm like, bowling? What's bowling?
I've had people overhear me and they'd say, "Why are you anti-bowling?"
Can you hear this? Can you go to schools?
Yeah, we'll be in schools and we're actually going to stop at the Capitol. Thanks for letting us talk and for
Keep doing this. Hopefully it'll catch on.
This is Mr. Mark Norwine, and he is completing just a small trek. He's walking from Kansas City to St. Louis. Here is Mr. Mark.
Hi guys. I work for an organization called CHADS Coalition, which you would not have heard of. And CHADS, C-H-A-D-S, stands for Communities Healing Adolescent Depression and Suicide. And I'm also the bullying prevention manager. So you can imagine every day when I get up, I'm either dealing with suicide, mental health, or bullying. Some pretty tough topics, right? So let's talk about how this relates to you. When I was growing up, you know what you couldn't talk about? Cancer. That seems silly. Then when I got into college, you know what you couldn't talk about? AIDS, HIV. And today, the thing that we've taught you can't talk about is mental health. Can I have that brain picture, please? Our brains change constantly. Every day, your brain is changing. The one that's all lit up is the healthy brain. That means all the chemicals are reacting the way they're supposed to. And the person that has this brain over here, it almost looks like a house with no lights on. And when that brain is looking like that, that person has to get some help. Here's the problem. I was in this boat. Most of the time when you're severely depressed, you're paralyzed. You emotionally can't do anything. And when you're paralyzed, you're not going to get yourself help, so you do have to rely on other people. You live with mom and dad? Okay, we need to make sure that they know that you are concerned that there might be something more than just depression.
Like I have anxiety and depression is what I'm medicated
And I have had horrible anxiety. If you ever need help, we can give you help by phone. Give you that extra help. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Hi, hon. Hi. What's your name? The second girl that came up to me, and I saw all the markings from cutting, and they were significant, and they looked like she had been doing it for a long time, and come to find out she's been cutting since she was 7. You know, starting to cut at age 7, she's cut for 6 years. Very addictive behavior. It'll be very difficult for her to stop. But I think she wants to stop, and I think she wants to get more help than she's getting right now, and so that's why we spent so much time talking.
She said that she's really thinking about letting them.
Put you in a hospital for a while. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world.
I don't know.
I've been there 3 times. I've been there 3 times. And this last time when I came out, they had done so much good for me that I haven't had any episode in 2 years.
It scares me. I
Oh,
don't want to.
I know it does. But the thing is, you're also in there with people that understand what you're going through. You know?
Mom, I'll tell you why I want to.
Oh, is that what you tried to do?
Today kind of was the first time in a long time where I believe this might have happened. You know, this all happened for a reason, so you could, you know, get to this point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know what kind of hell, I kind of know what kind of hell you've been through, and you know, part of, if I could take that away and still allow you to do what you're doing now, I'd do it. But it seems like you have to have one or the other. You know?
Yeah, you have to experience it to understand it.
I've been really trying to figure out why I've been such a reluctant participant, because I want to be supportive of him, and I know it's cathartic for him to do this and to talk to people and get his message out there. But I couldn't figure out why I don't want to do this. Besides the fact that obviously reliving painful memories isn't something anybody really wants to do. A friend of mine I was talking to about it said, how would you feel about talking about this if Mark hadn't survived his illness? And I said, then it'd be completely different for me, because then I'd be the most vocal advocate there is about mental health and the stigma around it. And that's when I realized why I don't want to do this, is because I've protected everybody for 30 years. The reason why I decided to talk about it was because a friend of mine was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years ago, and before she started chemo, she was telling me that she wanted to be in a clinical trial. She said it's going to make her sicker than if she tried another drug, and I said, why are you doing this? You don't need to do the clinical trial. And she said, because 25 years ago, some woman that I didn't know did it for me so that I can be on the right medicines. So if I can do that for somebody, I will. So that's why I decided to talk about this. Can that stop for a minute?
Can't find anything, Mom. It's just, I don't know how she's made it, man. She preemptively saves us from so much stuff. What's the longest you guys have ever been apart?
10 days?
What for? Huh? Where were you?
Probably the hospital. Come on, underwear. But the reason I said that it's so important the way you treat each other, this is the reason. Bullying in schools is just as hard on somebody as abuse at home. Bullying behaviors at school and abuse at home is just about the same thing in terms of how it's going to affect you. So that's why I'm saying, anytime you bully somebody, anytime you pick on somebody, anytime you exclude somebody, it absolutely has an effect actually on the brain and how the brain functions.
Did you used to get bullied too? Did people
I was bullied. I was bullied. What it was a group of guys that were also in my church, in Boy Scout troop, and in my neighborhood, in my school, so I could never get away from them. They were always there.
Yeah.
You know,
So
that's what made it hard.
on you a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like
Wait,
everywhere you went.
Yeah.
Did somebody stick up for you?
Eventually, like about 9th grade, I met some different guys, and they were great guys, and so then I kind of had a protection. Yeah, that's why you got to stick together. You got to make sure.
Yeah, that's good though.
Yeah. The anxiety from bullying, and you guys can relate to this if you've been bullied. The anxiety from constant bullying is that you get up every day and you don't know that you might have a good day or a bad day, but it doesn't depend on you. It all depends on what that person decides. And so you lose total control. And I think that's what causes so much anxiety is the fact that you don't know what your day is going to be like. So we will give you DVDs after this, so you can see the end of it. But just to kind of give you an idea of what had happened was we were going into a lot of schools, we were going into towns, and these were very rural areas, and these were areas that had 5 times the suicide rate of St. Louis or Kansas City. And that was really the purpose. The filming and all that happened, it was all secondary. You know, that was not something that we had planned on happening. It just happened because our son graduated from USC's film school, and he happened to have a filmmaker friend, Josh Salzberg. So very secondary, but very important in terms of it has carried this message on. It's been 2.5 years since we did the walk, and we have now been in, I think, 12 or 13 states, and we have a PBS coming up in all the state of Colorado. So there's some really, really great things happening, and it's very grassroots. It's very much a hand the DVD off to somebody who has a friend that's not getting help that needs to get help. You don't really get to see that in the first 15 minutes, but that's kind of where we lead you in the film. It's about an hour-long film, and toward the end we go to St. Clair where they had the 3 suicides, and that's our apex, right? That's the
spoiler alerts.
Spoiler alerts. That's top of the mountain, and everything's going to be so great as far as the film once we go into St. Clair. And 10 minutes before we spoke at the assembly, the principal took us into his office and said, do not mention the word suicide and do not mention our 3 suicides. So we had no idea what to do. And I was a fool. I stood up there like a fool. I had no idea what I could and couldn't answer. It was a really difficult 30 minutes. We left and we thought we had no film, and come to find out when they actually pieced the film together, that was probably the monumental moment of the film, was the fact that here we had people that we thought were going to embrace us and bring us in, and they wanted to have nothing to do with us. So that's where we'll leave this, I guess.
I just want to say first, thank you for coming to SCA, to the School of Cinematic Arts today, and sharing this story with us. And I want to say quickly to the audience before we start questions, if you have not seen the entire film, I'm sorry actually that our limited time today doesn't afford us the ability to show the entire movie, but if you haven't seen it, please do. It's really a wonderful film, and you should see the whole thing. With that, I just want to ask quickly, this is obviously a very personal story for all of you. And one of the things I'm curious about is why a film? Why did you choose to do it as a film as opposed to write a book or share it in another way?
It's easier to make a film about somebody else's family as opposed to your own. So that's why that's what I told the Norwines. I'm gonna let you guys open up about what you've been through. I guess Mark can answer. Why did you guys allow the film to happen?
Well, my wife had what would you call that? Veto? I don't know, veto power on anything that she didn't want in there. And at the time we had a 13-year-old who still didn't know that I had attempted. We have 3 kids, and one did not know that I had attempted twice. So she was going to make sure nothing was in there that might harm him. And then at the end, it was so good. Josh did such a great job, and Michael Hoffaker, who did the editing, that she allowed actually everything into the film.
Yeah, and I think I learned about the attempts Thanksgiving prior to the walk in April of 2013. So I had just graduated from cinema school and had this inkling that I wanted to make a movie. I didn't in a million years think that it would be about my family, and certainly not this subject, but Josh picked me up from the airport a couple days after I had spoken to Dad originally about his attempts, and we went to Chipotle, and I still remember exactly where we were sitting, and I said, I think, I don't know what we can do, but I think we have a unique ability and platform to do something. And, you know, in this day and age when everybody's on their phone and a screen kind of captures our attention constantly, we thought, well, why not use those USC student loans for good and, you know, try to put out a positive message in the media, you know, a form of media that really starts a positive conversation about mental health. Yeah.
Did you guys get to know each other better?
Yeah, I think so. I think you might have. I don't know if you learned much more about me. Obviously, you don't see it, but near the end of the film, we finally have this kind of tough discussion about the actual events leading up to his attempts and how he attempted and all of these things. And so the great irony of all of this is we talk about St. Clair and how St. Clair didn't want to talk about these issues, and yet chronologically throughout the film we had yet talked about this very difficult issue. So I certainly learned that. I learned that my dad is an incredibly strong man with an incredible willpower and an immeasurable love of his family, and has some great friends. I learned that.
You mentioned in the film, I think, that suicide is like 3 to 5 times more prevalent in rural areas than in cities, which is curious to me. And I understand that maybe isolation is one of the reasons, but clearly today people can feel very isolated in big cities as well. Why do you think that is? That
It's also, if I can interject, there's a lot of evidence that being an immigrant is a risk factor for mental illness. So that's
typically city.
Typically
city, right? I think in Missouri, the reason rural areas have so many more attempts is because the resources, we don't have many resources outside of St. Louis, Springfield, and Kansas City. And so what you find is, you know, people get into well, for instance, you go into a school in a rural area and you're not getting any kind of awareness presentation on suicide prevention. St. Louis, we have $40 million just for mental health for kids in St. Louis attacks. You don't have that in the rural areas at all. We have 3/4 of our counties in Missouri do not have a licensed psychiatrist anywhere in the county.
54% of our counties in the country don't have a licensed psychiatrist.
Wow. What was your main goal in doing the film, and what's the most important takeaway message from the film?
You want to do a waterfall? You start. And
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the kind of thing, and I'm sure everybody can relate to this a little bit, where I really am the picture of the stigma of mental health, at least me from a few years ago. I knew what I had seen on the news after a school shooting or something like that, and when Eric told me, again, this is a spoiler alert for the movie, Eric has bipolar disorder. When he told me that for the first time, I was a little scared. I didn't even know what that meant. And so for me, the journey of the movie was about learning about this whole world that was right under my nose that I think I had mislabeled, I just didn't know the first thing about. And so now I feel like an advocate all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the film opens with the statistic that 1 in 5 Americans suffer from a behavioral health disorder, a mental health disorder. And so everyone in here is touched by this issue, whether they know it or not. And a big, a significant part of all of this for us was our family's kind of a Norman Rockwell painting. You know, we're upper middle, on the outside, yeah. You know, middle class family, 3 kids. Our parents were always at all of our sporting events, first in line for the plays. Dad went to the father-daughter dances, coached the basketball teams, and beneath the surface, we were suffering in a lot of ways. And I think our hope with the film, to answer your question, is to really provide hope for people that might be going through a similar thing and say, you're not alone. This isn't unique to you. You're not weird. And there is hope for a better future and a chance to live life well, not just live.
There's a line in the film, I think it's, if you haven't experienced it, you can't understand it. And my question is, how can we help people who have not experienced it help others who are experiencing it today?
I think, first of all, I think we tend to, if you have a mental illness, and I have bipolar disorder, so does Eric, and I think when you have a mental illness, sometimes we look at the 80% and we say, you don't get it and you don't understand. And what we forget as people that have a mental illness is that there's probably 20 or 30% of the population in America that does not have any mental health issues. And that's okay. And I think for a time, maybe I was resentful of that, and now I get it, that 30% don't understand what we go through, but they're not to blame for that. It's that they've never experienced it, and they don't understand when you can't get off the couch, you can't get off the couch. That doesn't make any sense to somebody with perfectly good mental health. I think it's very difficult. I think the empathy piece is very difficult, going back and forth, because you do have to really experience it.
But I would also say, to that end, are there college students here? Raise your hand. Have you ever felt anxious about a test? No? Yeah. You know, someone that you lose a loved one, or you go through an a period of trauma, whether it's diagnosable or not, at some point in life, and this is kind of Dad's line, we're all humbled to dust. And so, you know, the important thing is that empathy gap, and how do we close it? How do we take our personal experiences in life, whether or not they're diagnosable or not, and translate that into being there for a friend? And quite often, I think the biggest thing anyone can do, if you're told you can't understand, listen. Try to understand. That's the greatest thing you can. You don't have to be a licensed counselor to be a good listener, and listening can go a really, really long way.
Did you run into a lot of people during the course of your travels who hadn't told anyone but suffered themselves and opened up to you as a result of the film?
We had conversations with people that we would have never expected to even come across, literally walking the trail. And it's like we said, everybody in here knows somebody that has a significant mental illness. Everybody does, because 20% of the population, you know, so if you know 5 people, you know somebody. So we ran into all kinds of people that had issues, and that were glad we were doing what we were doing, and they made it very clear that they also wanted to break that stigma that they felt.
I would run into people sometimes in the news media who were like, nobody knows except my mom and dad that I have severe bipolar illness, and I've been in the same workplace for 30 years, nobody knows, and she felt comfortable telling me.
And that's actually what led one of Eric's rules going into the movie, because originally it was, you know, Mark's walk, and Eric said, well, maybe we can bring a camera along or something, and, you know, we can follow what my dad's doing. He said, but my rule is I don't want to be involved. I don't want to share my story. I don't want to talk about my own diagnosis. And it was really through hearing about everyone else come forward and say, oh, you're talking about this? Thank you, because this is what I'm going through, that motivated Eric to tell his story.
On St. Louis Live Television, you'll find out.
Another part of the movie, yeah.
As good a place as any to come out, right?
Right, exactly. And everybody knows, at least.
Can you talk just for a minute about the variance with which different people cycle? I was kind of interested to learn that people who do have bipolar disorder sometimes cycle every few years, and sometimes others cycle every few weeks. And I actually didn't realize that and give much thought to that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, Eric and I cycle completely differently. He was diagnosed at 16, very clear roller coaster, right? And I was the big Ferris wheel, and I would cycle every 2 to 3 years, and we had no clue it was bipolar. My wife would ask me, do you think you have bipolar? I said, absolutely not. I don't have bipolar disorder. I have bipolar disorder.
And so cycling meaning?
Going from, you know, real extreme highs for a long period of time, very manic, don't need to sleep, working pretty much night and day, had a night job and day job, and then coming down on the other side and getting so depressed that I had to almost quit everything I was doing.
And for me, I have what's called rapid cycling bipolar disorder. So anyone with a psych textbook could have diagnosed me, because at its peak, I was going from manic to depressed in between 8 to 10 times a day my junior year of high school. And you don't see it in this portion of the film, but I liken it to getting on a plane every day and not knowing where you're going to land, and you're not flying the plane. So that's kind of the analogy I like to use.
Eric had such lows that he literally fell asleep during his SAT test or ACT test. Fell asleep.
And still got into USC.
I have one question, which is not more of a cinematic question, I guess, than one having to do with mental illness. But this also strikes me, this film, as being a really wonderful father-son story. How has making this film impacted your relationship as father and son?
We travel a lot more together.
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing. You know, Eric was doing. Can I tell this? Eric was doing the Hollywood.
I don't know what you're gonna say.
Eric was doing the Hollywood thing for the last 5 years. USC Film School, then graduated and was working out here in the business. Can I talk about this?
Go ahead.
And I got a phone call from Eric 3.5 months ago, and he was delusional, he was paranoid, and he was severely depressed to the point where he wouldn't come out of his apartment. And we did not know, because we were in St. Charles, Missouri, what all was going on out here in California. And I told him, you need to either get on a plane or I'll come out there and help you get on a plane. And he got home by midnight that night and has actually gone through a program, a hospital program, and is pretty much committed to staying in St. Louis the rest of his life, I think, and potentially getting into the mental health field, not for sure. But so he's had a significant change in the last 3.5 months, and it just shows you that it's you have no idea with bipolar disorder, you know exactly what's going to happen. We had no clue as to what he was going through.
Thank you. All true. That's the sequel. I think that the biggest thing that I learned, the biggest point of growth for us as a father and son, and huge testament to Josh and all of the great filmmakers who helped put the movie together, because they really figured out that was kind of the central piece of the movie, was this kind of father-son road trip. But what I learned throughout the film and making the movie was our tagline, which is "No one does it alone." And so when I kind of fell on hard times, I looked at what I valued and what mattered to me, and I really realized that family was my base of support. And so it didn't make sense for me to not be near that base. And so it's been a challenging 3 months or so, but I'm living well again, and very happy to be back at USC.
It's something that Eric and I have talked a lot about. It's kind of, I'm a writer in addition to having made this documentary, and it kind of colors everything I work on now. I'm never writing anything without thinking about what's the psychology behind this, what is this person dealing with, and that. Listen, that may be base level screenwriting right there, but in a new way, having an appreciation and empathy for what everyone's going through.
Can you tell us at all what we should be looking for in terms of just being alert to this kind of thing? I mean, it's one thing to raise awareness, which I think you're doing very well. It's another thing to shed light on the issue, which clearly you're doing very well. But early detection seems to me to be very, very important. What should we be looking for in ourselves, in our friends, our families, our students, that might make a difference in terms of early detection?
And half we import what you're doing with other people in other schools. I'm sorry. What about other schools and college-age kids? I mean, can you think about scaling this up to be something that,
I think so, and I also think I work for an organization, which you heard on the film. I do work for an organization, and we do go into colleges, and we do talk to freshmen, and we talk to RAs so that they will know the signs when they see kids that are buckling under the pressures, more anxiety than they should feel. But we have about 1,000 presentations with high school kids every year, and we know now that over half of all mental illness is detectable before the age of 14. So we should be doing this. We should be finding out if these kiddos have mental health issues before the age of 14. And there are signs, and we knew with Eric that something wasn't right when he was 10 or 11. We knew something wasn't right, but we didn't know what it was, and now they don't even use bipolar disorder as a diagnosis for kids. They've taken that diagnosis away. But that's exactly what he was experiencing, was bipolar disorder. So yes, we can do it, but we have to get in the schools and we have to talk to these kids, because we talk to 20,000 students a year and over 2,000 tell us they want help. So that tells us that they know something's going on.
I think a big thing, certainly as it relates to suicide, but generally with any sort of mental health issue, if things start to become less important than they were, if there's joy, if a student used to find joy in reading and they don't read anymore, that's a sign. If they withdraw from their group of friends, that's a sign. If they're not just living like kids, that's a sign, at least for a conversation to be started. And quite frankly, that's a difficult conversation to have. And we have a lot of kids that, get diagnosed early with ADD or ADHD, and then we go on as they grow older to find out it was something more, I don't want to say more significant, but something, bipolar disorder, depression, whatever it might be. But I think if you really look at the core of somebody and what they enjoy doing, and if that is diminished in any way, whether it's because they're depressed or they're anxious about doing that thing anymore, that's a real key sign that there might be something there.
Next steps. I think continuing to do exactly what we're doing, but also we have some high schools now that are allowing us to come in and show the film. I think that's important. I think these kind of discussions, and I think getting questions from an audience, I think all those things are super important to break stigma. I think we have to talk about it, just like we now talk about cancer. We talked about HIV, and now it's like no big deal at all to talk about that. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to continue to have discussions, and we have to teach our children that we can talk about these things because we have taught them not to talk about it.
That's a perfect segue. Why don't we take questions from the audience and see if...
I wanted to ask you a question about your style of delivery, and you a question about something about your film. You have a really wonderful style, and you're very self-confident. Is that from, like, did you teach before? Because you didn't just get up and... Yeah.
I taught school. I have 2 degrees in education, and I got out of education after 4 or 5 years because of the anxiety and the bipolar disorder. I didn't know why I got out, but I knew I couldn't do it. And so now I get to teach again. I have a voice. I got a voice again at age 52. So
just a little bit of that I saw of the 15 minutes was quite wonderful with the close-ups, of the shoes, and obviously it's about walking. But the camera angles from up. Is that a particular kind of remind me of E.T. when is that
you mean looking up at Mark?
Looking it up from a lot of angles was an upward, and I'm wondering why you chose that particular.
Yeah, it kind of curtails with what you're saying about Mark. When we first started out on this, you notice a lot of people are dropping his name, and some people aren't sure what to say, and there's a lot of fumbling. And something we liked was this idea of making looking at an ordinary guy as a hero. And as well spoken as Mark is, I think what's great about his story is he fell into this position. He didn't go out to try to be a hero. He very quickly became one accidentally. So that was one thing.
Clearly not a hero.
That was one thing we were trying to show. The ordinary guy is the hero.
Eric? Oh, which is the son? Yeah, Eric.
Yep.
Okay, it's a 2-part question. I'm sorry. You look nothing alike. Okay. 2-part question. If you were diagnosed at 16, were you put on medication?
I was.
So my question is, why at the age of 26, 25 did you have a relapse? Or did you go off your medicine?
No, I didn't. I would say that when I got my diagnosis, it was kind of, it's like having a headache your whole life and someone gives you an Advil and the headache goes away and you kind of stop thinking about any other tangential things that might be occurring. I was still an incredibly anxious person. I kind of took that to be typical Midwestern, firstborn, anxious to please. And it manifested itself really over the course of 10 years, increasing an anxiety to the point where, as my father shared with you all, 3 months ago, I kind of hit this peak of anxiousness and became paralyzed. I would wake up at 6 in the morning and not get out of bed till noon. I'd have 2 emails that I would need to send, and I've sent emails for a living for the last 3 years, and I couldn't do it. And then when I entered outpatient therapy in June, No, I'm sorry, July 20th. And when I was discharged, funny enough, my diagnosis was severe clinical depression. And really what it boiled down to is I was in the right place here in LA for certain reasons, and I was in the wrong place here in LA for probably more reasons. And that's kind of what you think. I was still taking my medicine. I never stopped, and you don't think that you could get depressed, but just because you have bipolar disorder and you're treating it, that doesn't mean all of a sudden that circumstances can't cause your brain to change. And that's what happened for me.
I understand. I love your movie. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I'll say thank you for all of us.
And this story is more about this question is more about the road ahead in terms of sort of the Venn diagram. You talked about isolation and perhaps the immigrant story being more isolated, and then other pressing forces, whether it's bullying in a school or in a workplace. So if we were fast forwarding 3 to 5 years ahead and somebody said to you, what's on your wish list to move, to change the landscape, to become less or destigmatized, to have it be, what cancer is today. It's no longer the forbidden sea. I'm interested in that from the filmmaker, the activist, and the advocate position.
I'll start it off by saying I think my goal 3 to 5 years down the line, and that's really, yes, what the goal of the movie is for us. For me, it's to create advocates. I think there's a movie about what it's like to be an advocate, the ups and downs and the struggles and the victories. And Mark says at a certain point, it's one piece of the puzzle. And I think we put the puzzle together quicker if we have more advocates. So that's kind of my goal.
My goal is to pass legislation in every state that every child in high school has to have 1 hour of mental health awareness. And in Missouri, we had in Missouri, and we did stop in Jeff City, which is nobody knows the capital of Missouri, right? Can't even spell Missouri. So it's Jefferson City, and we stopped there, and we did talk a little bit to some of the legislators. But the fact is that this year we lost 3 people in Missouri government to suicide. And at the exact same time, they were trying to pass a bill that would have required every high school kid to get 1 hour of awareness, and it didn't pass. Now, what in the world could somebody have a reason to not pass that? It doesn't even make sense. So that's my goal.
I share that goal. I also I plan on having children someday. I need to find a woman to trick.
Is this what this is about?
Which, by the way, so I'm
okay.
single and long walks on the beach. But I've said that I hope if someone unfortunately is diagnosed with breast cancer and they go into work the following Monday, there's flowers on their desk, there's people asking how they're doing, they're saying, can I bring food over, how are the kids, I'll pick them up, giving them hugs, saying I love you, all these things. And it's wonderful, and it's important, and it's needed. It does nothing about the fact that they have cancer. But if you have depression or you have anxiety and you're able to be open about that with your coworkers and with your loved ones, that can make a real difference. Hey, how you doing today? Maybe flash somebody a smile that you wouldn't ordinarily have thought to smile at. My hope is that my kids grow up in a world where there's a 1 in 3 chance one of my children's going to have bipolar disorder. And it's my hope that I don't have to call and lie to the secretary at the school as to why they're not going to be coming in today. And I hope that they understand when I say EJ, or Eric, I don't know what the kid's name is, EJ, he's not doing too well today. We're going to keep him home. We're going to make sure he's doing well, because at the end of the day, wellness is more important to me than any geometry test.
What do you do, though, if you have a loved one who doesn't want to get help and you feel like they need help?
That is so difficult, and no one no one has to get help. That's the problem, is no one has to get help. And I have, now I've been in this field almost 5 years, and we have so many family friends that have gotten other people that they know to come talk to me. And there are so many people I talk to, and they aren't ready. And if they're not ready, you can't force anybody to get help. But what you can do is you can do things like, and that's why this is so grassroots, you can take this little documentary and you can hand it off. And I have had people call me back and say, I want to get help. I saw the film, and now we realize that we have bipolar disorder. We have, significant depression going on or whatever. So, I think education, just like always, is one of the keys, is educate people and figure out ways you can get them to at least acknowledge maybe that they have an issue.
And you said, to go along with that, I'll even say I passed this along to my sister who is struggled with some mental health issues, and it took her some time to watch it, and when she finally did, the big thing that she took away from it was, oh, I thought that was just me, because I'm afraid to talk about it. I didn't know other people were going through similar things. And not that has to happen through Walking Man. It can happen through a lot of ways. But, even just seeing your experience represented, maybe that helps.
I was wondering how the other children that you have, are they supportive of the cause? How did they react to all this?
We have Eric's 25, almost 26. We have a 23-year-old daughter, and she really does not want to have much to do with this. We love her. She loves us. There's no issue. She's just not really wanting to put her life out there. And so, she's shown at the end of the film because she's at the last part of the film where we walk into the park. Another spoiler. The park, Creve Coeur Park, St. Louis. And then we have a 15-year-old son who at the time was 13, and he is into basketball and couldn't care less about any of this. And that's great because he's really mentally healthy and probably the only one of all of us.
Okay, so I have a question about the filmmaking. So as far as the post-production process, and so as we all know, there's two movies you get, the one you film and then the one in the editing room. So what was the challenge or your biggest challenge as far as making sure the whole truth comes out and how you see it, everyone else sees it? So what was your biggest challenge in the editing room as far as post-production?
The toughest thing, I'll say maybe two things. The toughest thing was you have the entire lives of this family, and what's the most important, what's necessary to share with the audience to get the ideas across. That was the toughest thing, because you really have to edit their lives down and go, okay, I know this thing seems important, but let's get it out of there. That was really tough. And then maybe that was the toughest thing. Did you have anything else?
It's a slug, the film was shot in April of 2013.
You don't have to give away all of our secrets here, but no.
Sorry. But we
takes
had
time.
We had 110 hours of footage, and the movie's 65 minutes long. So that's a lot to go through and find little pieces. And again, I think and I didn't have anything to do with putting it together, so I can brag about it in a way that he won't. I think what Josh did really, really well is he took a really, really difficult narrative and added a lot of nuance and a lot of... It's a real representation of my family. My family's pretty funny. We like to joke around. It's been a tough go, but it hasn't been a sad go all the time. And so having grown up a Norwine, I'm really, really proud to say that the people you see on screen are true to the real people that we are.
I talked to you, Mark, on the phone. I'm Lolo.
It's Lolo.
Aloha, nice to meet you.
How are you?
Good, sir. And to commend you guys are heroes, because what you're doing is saving lives. People may not understand the illness, but it's a crippling illness. It's to explain it, it's a demonic, when something takes over you and you have no way of fighting it, And during the film, I saw you along the walk, and as further and further as you went, I saw, there's, I can listen to what you guys were saying, but it was more, I was watching your body language and how you were taking it, and there was a part when Eric had a hard time getting you out of bed, and again, that's that paralyzing, that crippling, where you're already tired because your mind, you've already saved the world 3 times, but your body hasn't even got out of bed yet, and you're paralyzed. And what I wanted to ask you was, during that time, that moment when Eric couldn't get you out of bed, was what inspired you to get up and face it, and push you to pretty much keep fighting, because that's pretty much what we have to keep doing.
Right. Lolo is a veteran, by the way, and yeah. And he and I talked by phone. He found out I was coming out, so he decided to come up from San Diego. But also, I just want to mention with PTSD that we lose between 22 and 25 veterans every day to suicide. That's staggering. And so we have these tough men that don't die on the battlefield, and they come home and they die in the U.S. So we have to do more for the PTSD. Luckily, I was not mentally in the state I looked like I was in. I was just physically in a really bad place after about day 15, yeah. And you guys don't get to see it, but if you do see the end of it, I'm so red and weathered by the end of this thing, And we walked probably 8 or 9 days in all-day rain. So, it was, by the end, we were whooped. And I think that's what you were probably seeing was more the physical. But thanks, Lolo.
I will say, I don't want to sell Mark out here, and I'm not sure this is something that is completely represented in the movie, but Eric, at a certain point, even though Eric had his moments of giving up or wanting to give up on the walk, at a certain point, when we were getting close to the finish line, it's like, Dad, you can't quit now. We've got a camera crew. We've got people waiting for us. We've told all of our family and friends. You got to get to the finish line.
And if I made one more thing is from the film, great. It was great. That's why I'm here. That's why I reached out to you. I'm too trying to help my family because I'm trying to learn and educate myself because I want a life of quality. I don't want to allow this to defeat me anymore. But that's one thing the film inspired me is that it's a life of quality that we're reaching for. Right. And not to allow and to keep fighting because when you get tired, you do what a lot of people have done. And it's not to blame them. It's not to, but you're so tired. But what I really loved about the film is about the quality of life and that a father and son is fighting this together, so, you're a hero as a dad and to me, so I really appreciate that.
Well, you're a real hero, by the way. Yeah, don't salute me. I salute you, sir.
I don't want to say this as in any promotional way at all, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to. We have copies of the movie. We'd be happy, to get it to you guys, but also, if you want to share it with family or friends, it's on iTunes. Go to our website, walkingmanmovie.com. I just say that in terms of I'm so happy that you saw the movie and it inspired you in that way, and don't want to miss the opportunity to get it out to whoever needs to see it.
I've got a question over here. So, over here, Mark. Hey. So it's a two-part question for Mark and Eric. Mark, I'm wondering, considering your experience with bipolar, what was it like to receive the phone call from Eric? He's delusional and all of this, and because it's something that you're familiar with, maybe in a different way, what was that like for you? What was your experience at the moment?
That's a great question. I am not the hovering parent at all. My wife enables, I don't. Is that true?
His wife loves.
She loves. And no, she's not an enabler. But anyway, I think when this happened, I was really thankful that I had been in this field for 4.5 years, because I don't know if I would have known what to do. I think I would have had him stay out there. And because I've been through a lot of these things with different individuals, I knew he needed to come home. When you're delusional and paranoid and you're not coming out of your apartment, you need to come home. And so I was thankful that I had the opportunity for 4.5 years to do what I was doing. Yeah, did that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Eric, what is it like for you to have a father that has had experience with bipolar, and do you think that has served as like a buffer or more of a support system?
The remarkable thing about it is it saved my life. I've learned a tremendous amount, but to have someone that you look up to perceive certain things in his life as weak, and as a child you look at him and it's your hero. You don't get it in the movie, but Dad threw newspaper routes in the bitter cold in the middle of the night. That was heroic to me. It didn't matter to me what he did. I just knew that he did it for me. And so having that frame of mind gave me a big reason to come home. It made it a lot easier to reach out, that's for sure. I liken it to when you're going through a struggle, whatever it might be, in my case, severe anxiety and bipolar and depression, you feel like you're in the middle of the ocean treading water, and you look around, and everywhere you look, you don't see land. And to have somebody who happens to be your dad pull up in a boat and say, hey man, I haven't seen land in a while either, but we're going to find it together, hop on in, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. I think we found land.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having the courage to share such a personal story with us. My question is, this is so real that what do you think it would take, kind of building on Mr. Norwine's comment about the legislature, when even in today's day and age, people don't have access to mental health, and even if you happen to be employed, the standard package of health benefits is so low on the mental health side of things. What would it take, in your opinion, for this nation to wake up and provide the support?
It's really difficult because in rural areas, nobody can make a living in the mental health field. Psychiatrists can't make a living. And so what they're doing a lot now is they're basically Skyping and doing therapy online. That sort of thing is what they've started doing, and that's fairly effective. That takes away the fact that he would have to drive or the patient would have to drive an hour. So those are the kinds of things that we have to do, but I still think it goes back to every single school has to have every child go through some hour program so that they understand that what they're feeling isn't right, and so that they can get the help that they need to get, because any kid in a rural area can still come into St. Louis where all the resources are and get help if they just know that they need help. But in the rural areas, people are very independent, and getting help they're not wired to get help. So you're fighting that too. It's really a struggle. It's a real struggle. I wish I had an easy answer.
This is the more idealistic answer, I suppose you could say, slightly pessimistic. We have to have a conversation in our country about what we value. And if we value life, and if we value quality of life. And we see these school shootings, and I'm not going to get political, because the one thing we hear afterwards is everyone agrees on we need more mental health services, right? That no sane person goes into a school and shoots children. And had that person been identified earlier, perhaps they would have gotten help and that wouldn't have happened. I was recently in Washington, D.C. for what's called the National Council for Behavioral Health's Hill Day. And one of the major pieces of legislation, along with what Dad's talking about, is mental health first aid. And it would require every administrator, every teacher, any person in a school to go through a professional development day of mental health first aid training. If we teach them how to do the Heimlich maneuver, why aren't we teaching them how to identify a child who might be struggling? And the reason that that's so significant, and the reason why I think that if you want to get behind it in some sort of public policy advocacy way, that's a really significant thing to push, because not every student even is known by their school counselor. But every student has that person in the school that they connect with, whether it's a librarian or I was really close to Kevin, our custodian. And Kevin, our custodian, knew the days that were rough on me. And had he been in a position, fortunately my parents were capable of getting me the help. But if Kevin knew more about mental health and what the signs were and what to do, I bet you he would have been able to get me directed to the right services. So I think it's a two-parter, but it's definitely going to take some leadership on the behalf of our leaders.
Hi, beautifully shot. Can't wait to watch the whole movie. But I have a question. During the movie, were there times when you had a problem that you couldn't shoot it? Because someone would say, oh, no, you're not allowed to film this or whatever. And you would have to convince people. And then once you actually edited the movie and you're ready to release it, this isn't X-Men, this isn't Superman, this isn't the audience for that, but it's a subject which, I mean, 1/5 of us have a problem here, and we need to talk about this, but people don't want to listen, right? So, as a filmmaker, what were those issues that you had?
For the first part, challenges along the way. We were lucky for the most part in terms that we made a commitment. I think the smartest thing we did was we said we're going to shoot nonstop for 2 weeks and just have the crew, probably much to Mark's chagrin. We were constantly just always around. I'd say the one thing that we weren't allowed to shoot that I wish we could have seen was the administration talking to Mark in St. Clair, about not, talking about suicide. That's something that, Eric kind of explains to us what happened. But other than that, I'm trying to think if there are any challenges. I got to say the great thing is we went out to all of the students that are featured in the movie. We showed them the movie. We showed their parents the movie before anyone else saw it and said, are you comfortable with this? If not, we'll do the blurry face thing. We'll take the footage out. We'll do whatever we have to do. And every student that was involved this is kind of the inspiring thing, is they understood my story needs to be told if it's going to help another kid. So that was kind of the great thing. The second part of the question, the challenge, you mean the challenge in getting the movie out there? I think the challenge is anybody that sees the movie says, oh, wow, everyone needs to see this. But because Mark Norwine's not quite to his Tom Cruise status that he'll eventually be, it's there's a lot of movies out there, and that's where we really rely on. We've been fortunate to go to schools like USC and Harvard and Columbia, and we've been fortunate enough to get invited in by high schools and mental health organizations. So it's events like this, honestly, like you guys go out and tell everybody, and that's how this movie gets spread. So that's the challenge.
Yeah, that's the challenge, but that's the exciting thing too, is that this is, if we're going to make real lasting change related to mental health, it is about starting conversations. And we kind of steal from Robert Kennedy and talk about the ripple effect of all of this. And if this can just be kind of the stone dropped in the water and the ripple effect goes on, and gets people talking, then it's served its purpose. So my hope is that you guys leave here today and you have something to talk about.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time and we need to move on to the next part of our program. But I want to thank you, all three of you, again for coming and sharing this with us. Really fabulous. Thank you.